समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया?
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Amid the worsening relationship between India and the United States, Donald Trump has finally announced a new envoy and ambassador for India. Sergio Gor is being described by Trump himself as a great friend and someone who has the American president's absolute trust. But there is a kicker in the tail, and it is this. Mr. Gor will also be the envoy for South Asia and Central Asia, leading to concerns about a continued hyphenation between India and Pakistan by Washington. How should we read the announcement, this ambassadorial announcement of a man whom Elon Musk once infamously called a snake? Does this point to Trump wanting to patch up with India, or is this actually a continued attempt to reset relations with India and play the schoolyard bully? I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story. On the program today, we'll try and make sense of the new announcement by Trump coming in the middle of a worsening relationship between India and the United States. The tariff trade war is seen to be anything but about trade. While there has been insult upon insult heaped on India by varying officials in the Trump administration, India has continued to respond with restraint. Even earlier today, Foreign Minister Jaishankar said that there is no quote-unquote kutti with the United States of America, but said that Trump was the president who was unlike any other president that the world had dealt with. Meanwhile, after the exit of Eric Garcetti, we finally have, and you see him on the screen, a new candidate for America's ambassador to India. Sergio Gor is someone Trump calls a great friend. He's a full MAGA candidate. He's also somebody who is seen to be one of the factors that Elon Musk left, calling Mr. Gor publicly on X to be a snake. More concerned, a matter of more concern for India is the fact that Sergio Gor has also been named as a special envoy for all of South and Central Asia, leading to concerns about a possible and likely attempt at hyphenation with Pakistan. Let me introduce our guest today as we try and make sense of it all. With Trump, that's never an easy thing because there is no consistency, as it were, in his decisions. We're joined by a veteran diplomat, Ambassador Dr. Mohan Kumar. Welcome to the program, sir. Also joining us is a military veteran, Gen Ata Hasnain, former GOC of the 15th Corps. Always a pleasure. And also one of India's finest strategic minds, Sushant Sareen, is with us. He's, of course, with the Observer Research Foundation. Thank you very much, everybody. Before we come to some of the things that FM Jaishankar has said today, I want first reactions to the fact that we finally, subject to confirmation, have a new ambassador, and the fact that he's also the special envoy for South Asia. Dr. Mohan Kumar, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, I'll start with you. Give me a second, sir. Can you unmute yourself? You might be muted at your end.
So thank you very much, I was saying, for having me on your show. No, the first thing that I think your viewers should know that in the State Department, the bureau, they don't call it division like we do in the Ministry of External Affairs. They call it bureau. The bureau is called the Bureau of South and Central Asian Affairs. So that's the first thing that I'd like to say. There is normally an assistant secretary who deals with it, and that is Paul Kapoor. And Paul Kapoor has not been, he's been confirmed, but he has not joined. So that is where we are. And I would have thought that I would have reacted with horror if it was an obscure career diplomat who was posted to Delhi. So the first thing that I would like to say is, in the American system, If you have somebody who has the ear of the president and who is a political appointee, it is a sign normally that the posting is important, the country is important, and indeed that has been confirmed by both J.D. Vance and by Marco Rubio, that this is one of the most important relationships in the world. Donald Trump hasn't said it, but the others have said it, and I doubt the others would have been allowed to say it without Trump saying okay. Second, I put it to you, first, it is South Asia and Central Affairs, and you have picked one country, Pakistan, and have talked about rehyphenation. Supposing you were in Pakistan, I would like to ask you, how would you feel if you had an ambassador in Delhi who has been told he is the special envoy for the whole region, and you are based in Delhi and not Washington or Islamabad? I would react with horror, frankly. I would say, what the hell is this? Because the Indians will be all over him. They will try to influence him. They have daily access to him. So that's the second thing that I would say. The third thing that I would say to you, Barkha, is that President Trump is unprecedented. You know this. We all know this. There is a special envoy for the Middle East. There is a special envoy for Latin America. There is a special envoy for the UK. The only two countries which don't have special envoys, actually, interestingly, is China and Russia. But do you even know the American ambassador in Russia? I don't know. Do you know the American ambassador in China? I don't know. But we all know Steve Witkoff, because that is Trump's style. It is Steve Witkoff who's running the negotiations on Ukraine. He's talking to Russia. You don't even hear of the American ambassador based in Moscow. Similarly, China, there is a new ambassador of America in China, but it is Scott Bessent who ran the negotiations for Trump when he was preparing the ground for a possible conversation between Xi Jinping and Trump. Given all this, I'm not saying all this is, fantastic or whatever, because the fact of the matter is this is the first time that you have an ambassador in Delhi who's also been made a special envoy for Southern Central Asian affairs. But I think he is more taking over the duties of the State Department Assistant Secretary of State than anything else. And you're only picking one country from a bunch of countries. There is Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan. There is South Asia, which obviously has Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Bhutan, etc. So really, I put it to you, yes, he may, do some miles traveling to Islamabad in his capacity as special envoy for South Asia. But how much can you really do this when you are ambassador in Delhi and you've got a bunch of countries which are in your charge? So I would say that we should really not overreact. This is typical Trump style. He operates through the special envoys. Steve Bannon has made a comment saying that apart from Susie Wiles, who's the chef de cabinet, there is only one person who can walk into Trump's room at this point, and that is Sergio Gor. So the way I look at it, it gives a tremendous opportunity for Indian diplomacy to try and interact and influence somebody who has the president's ear. I'll stop here, Barkha.
So, in other words, you are optimistic at this announcement and you're not overly bothered. Before I go to Sushant and General Hasnain, you are not overly bothered by the fact that he's also going to be an envoy for all of South Asia. You're not bothered by that, Ambassador.
I would have been bothered if he was special envoy for India, Pak, like Holbrooke, AFPAC. This is Southern Asian affairs. This is South and Central Asian affairs, which is exactly the denomination of the bureau that deals with the country in the State Department. It is the State Department that should be concerned about the hierarchy, not me. If he is going to do this, that's fine. If he wants to double up doing the job of the Assistant Secretary of State in the State Department, that is their prerogative. It is an internal matter for them. As far as I'm concerned, all I'm saying is Japan, countries like Japan, almost implore the United States to post a political appointee. They say if you post a career diplomat, it's a sign that the US does not take that country seriously. This is their system, Barkha. It's not our system. But I think there is no need for a knee-jerk reaction, and I'm not overly pessimistic is what I'm saying.
Okay, sure. Let me bring in Sushant before I come to General Hasnain. Only because, Sushant, on your X commentary today, you were less than impressed with Marco Rubio suddenly calling India one of the most important relationships to the US in the world. And you know, this kind of schizophrenic response from the Americans, Peter Navarro calling India a laundromat for the Kremlin, taking a racist swipe in terms of using the word Maharaja of tariffs, and so on. And now suddenly this. What do you make of it? And do you share Ambassador Kumar's sanguine or sort of cautious optimism about the fact that, look, at least he's got Trump's ears? And so far, the problem has been that India hasn't been getting through to Trump.
Look, I agree with Ambassador Kumar, but with caveats. Now, if this appointment had taken place maybe a couple of months back before all hell broke loose between India and the United States, I would probably agree 100% with what Ambassador Kumar said. But after what has transpired over the last 6-8 weeks, I cannot but be a little skeptical about the appointment and what it means and the kind of portfolio the guy has.
Yeah.
And the question is that, look, after you have burned this relationship or at least significantly damaged it, because the trust factor is completely missing. Barkha, you know, again, just look at it this way. If such an appointment had been made maybe 5 years back, what would have been the reaction in India? I think the three of us sitting out here on your show today would be welcoming it wholeheartedly. Today, if you just look at the reactions within India, there is skepticism. Yes, there is some cautious optimism like Ambassador Kumar is expressing, but there is also a very high degree of skepticism. And there is also maybe a sense of unease as to what exactly does his portfolio entail. You know, so there is that problem which is already visible. It's staring us in the face. We are not entirely sanguine about this particular appointment, and we don't know whether, as Trump's hitman, is he coming out here to bully us into submission? Is he coming out here to repair the relationship? Now, I would imagine that if it was only bullying, then they could have said, like Ambassador Kumar says, some nameless, faceless bureaucrat, and they didn't need to send one of his closest associates to India. Okay. And it's not as though India is, you know, a really hunky-dory place to be in. For many Americans, it's a kind of a punishment posting. Okay. But that's the reality, whether we like it or not. So why would you send somebody like him to a country like India if you just wanted to bully us into submission? Okay. So there is that counter argument which can be made. You could have just sent anybody, any nameless, faceless person, to say that you go and you just screw the Indians and make sure that they do what I want them to do. Now that's the other thing. But given the fact that there is a degree of hyphenation which the Americans have tried to bring in, where my point of disagreement with Ambassador Kumar is that, look, yes, on the face of it, South and Central Asia is a pretty big remit, right? And why are we just picking up India, Pakistan? But we know how the relationship has been developing. We know that Trump has a bee in his bonnet about trying to make peace between India and Pakistan. We know that the Americans had apparently promised the Pakistanis some kind of mediation dialogue with India, which they would facilitate. We know all of that, don't we? And there's enough telltale signs of it. Trump has indicated it. Rubio has said something to that effect. And just yesterday, Ishaq Dar says, although Ishaq Dar always lies, he never says a single piece of truth. He is one of those chartered accountants who always cooked books, never given true figures of anything, whether as finance minister or as chief munshi of the Sharifs. But even whatever he said in the Pakistani parliament, for whatever that damn parliament is worth, it's worth nothing to nobody really. But he makes a statement out there where he says that when other countries offer to mediate between India and Pakistan and facilitate our talks, we are very open to it and we welcome it. So when I see all of that along with how the Americans have behaved, there is bound to be a certain degree of skepticism, suspicion, distrust, call it what you will. So I am not entirely very sanguine about the prospects of having somebody who has the presidency here, because he can say anything to the president.
Yeah,
How do
yeah. I personally tend
nice.
to agree with you, Sushant. Though I see Ambassador Kumar's point that this isn't an obscure nobody, and so to that extent, you have a point. I mean, Ambassador has a point, but I shared your skepticism because there's no stability or internal logic to the kind of responses we've had from Washington. And Gen Ata Hasnain, I want to bring you in now, right? We can't decontextualize what's been happening between America and Pakistan. Munir's 2 trips, Munir's reported remarks at a private charity dinner making a nuclear threat, Munir talking about attacking India from the east, actually repeating what the DGISPR of Pakistan says on record to the Economist. Munir reportedly targeting or threatening Mukesh Ambani, and then the US Treasury Secretary going on record to make the same point about India's rich families, quote unquote, profiteering from this war, totally overlooking the fact that the Americans are now taking a 10% markup on all weapons that they're providing to the Europeans onwards to Kyiv, and therefore actually the ones who are profiting. How do you look at this appointment?
Thank you, Barkha. Thank you for inviting me after a very long time that I'm appearing on your show.
That's your fault. That's your fault, not ours.
Entirely my fault. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
First of all, starting with Asim Munir, I have stopped taking him seriously, frankly saying. Within the Pakistani establishment, someone rang me up this morning, very interestingly, to talk about another Munir. There is another Munir in Pakistan, in the Pakistan army, who retired long time ago, and he was spoken to and asked, who is this? Why is this gentleman Asim Munir? Why is he so uppity about everything? And he had some very, very nasty things to say about Field Marshal Munir. So I can actually show you within Pakistan also a lot of people are skeptical about him. And the way this relationship is going, I don't take it too seriously even now. But having coming back to the issue of the new American ambassador to New Delhi, I tend to go along with both my colleagues on the panel. Coming to Ambassador Mohan Kumar, you see, I do feel that, Barkha, I'll give you a parallel. Who is supposed to be the person in a cabinet, in an organization, in a setup, a corporate setup, who is closest to the CEO normally? Either it is the finance man or it is the personnel man. The man who is looking after placements, postings, etc. For example, in the Indian Army, who is considered a person very close to the army chief is the military secretary, who does all the postings of the 47,000 officers. Sergio Gor is the military secretary of the United States government. He is the closest. And if our friend, what's his name, who called him a snake?
Elon Musk.
If Elon Musk can call him a snake, obviously he must be very, very close to the president. Now, out of the blue, if a president decides to take one of his right-hand men and post him to a problem country, which he considers in his perception a problem country, I think it would be for a particular purpose. And let me be positive about it. Why assume negativity at this stage that Trump is just posting him here to create issues, to create more turbulence and things like that? It may be just to retrieve this relationship. A 38-year-old man who is, considered very powerful in the circles within Washington, 26 years, an immigrant himself, and that should be something that we should be looking at very positively. He comes to Delhi, and then he is appointed as a virtual Assistant Secretary of State, as Ambassador Mohan just said, Assistant Secretary of State. You may like to remember what in the time of Robin Raphael, when she was the Assistant Secretary of State also, the kind of turbulence that she could create. Equally, I suppose Sergio Gor can also create that kind of turbulence. But why look at it negatively at this stage? You could also create the right amount of positivity.
Because just 24 hours ago, another key aide to Trump called us a laundromat for the Kremlin.
Barkha,
Yes.
All this, do you take this very seriously? I mean, all this is happening. I know a lot of utterances are going on at the moment, and I look at it in a very different way. I think the Indo-US relationship is being taken apart to redo it. Right? This is the experience of the deep state of the United States, that the manner in which it has, looked at the example of China. China was supposed to be coming out in 1970, 71 and becoming a great friend of the United States. It was supposed to rebalance the whole Cold War, and that is how the Soviet Union was supposed to be defeated, and China and America would be cozying up thereafter. Everything has gone wrong thereafter. Is this I look at it from that angle, that is the United States reading India and India's strategic confidence, rising importance in the world? Is it looking upon it as a negative at the moment and thinking, why not redo it early enough before things go wrong? So I tend to think that come a few months more, things are going to improve, and this, on the first day after the appointment of an American ambassador, I would be the last to look upon this negatively.
Okay, so I think Sushant and I are on one side of this conversation in terms of the skepticism we feel, but I do take the point that both you and Ambassador Kumar are making about the fact that this is not a nobody. He is a somebody. If he's a somebody, there's a plan, there's an idea behind sending him to Delhi, and that even if there's a Pakistan or larger regional dimension to it, by stationing him in Delhi, you are acknowledging Delhi to be the fulcrum or the pivot. Agreed. Now, the question still remains that this can play out because it's Trump any which way, and we don't know. And FM Jaishankar has acknowledged as much, speaking earlier today at a conclave, where he said that Trump conducts foreign policy in public like no other American president, and this is not a problem unique to India. Take a look.
We've not had a US president who's conducted foreign policy as publicly as the current one. That itself is a departure. That's not limited to India. That's limited. In fact, for that matter, who's not conducted his domestic policies as publicly as this one too. So I think we got to understand, before I come to India-US, that the President Trump's way of dealing with the world, even dealing with his own country, is a very major departure from the traditional orthodox manner of doing so. I'm just giving you some examples. Say, the applications of tariff in this manner, even for trade, is novel. The application of tariffs for non-trade issues is even more so. The fact that a lot of this is said in public, often the first pronouncement is in public, is even more unusual. So this is a situation which the entire world is facing.
So I want to start with you, Sushant. The fact is that there are some who believe that the formalism with which India's very fine diplomats are trained and hardwired to respond, and you can see it in FM Jaishankar, he's scathing, but he's always civil. It's not the way Trump and his sort of cohorts operate. Otherwise, Navarro would not get to say what he does. The US Secretary, Treasury Secretary would not be able to talk in the way that he does, and so on. Do you believe that now that Trump has made a move, there should be some sort of, some sort of reimagined way of dealing with the Trump administration?
Barkha, you can keep reimagining whatever ways you want to deal with them, if you can, if anybody can. See, one way of looking at how the members of this administration, do their diplomacy or their politics in public is that that's a very American kind of way of doing things. They're very in your face, very upfront when you're dealing with them, whether in business or any other thing. They're pretty upfront. So one way of looking at it is that, that the niceties of diplomacy, they have no use for it. They will be blunt. They'll say something and then they'll invite a reaction and see whether that creates some kind of a negotiating space for them. That if that riles up a whole lot of countries and it upsets the apple cart, for many people, and it pisses off people, to use the correct really. That's too bad. You just have to grin and bear it. Now, that's one way of looking at it. But the other way of looking at it is that, something which General Hasnain mentions, that maybe they're thinking of some kind of a reset. Look, the question is, what is the kind of reset they're looking at? Now, one way of looking at it is, and again, maybe I'm being very pessimistic about it, it is that, look, here are these Indians who rather prematurely have started announcing themselves that they are one of the most pivotal players in the world. Okay? We need to pull them down. Who the hell do these guys think they are talking about strategic autonomy? What is their damn strategic autonomy? Okay? If they're not going to be dealing with, and they're not going to be following the lead of the Americans and the Europeans, then why should we, engage with these guys?
Yeah.
So it's that old imperial thing, or if you will, what George W. Bush had once said, you're either with us or against us. That thing is coming back. Now, that confronts us with a very serious choice. Now, what we want is that, look, we want to be very good friends with the United States. We think that this is a mutually beneficial relationship. Even if it is to counter China, for example, then we are not going to enter into a conflict with China for America's sake, just as America won't do for us, right? But we will be able to hold an entire flank and make sure that, there's nothing which happens on this flank, so America can concentrate wherever the hell it wants to concentrate. It doesn't need to focus on us. We'll hold our end of the bargain, right? Which is, again, it's a good way of strategic balancing, that we are not going to be interested in a scrapping match with a scrap with China, but we will hold our own, right? Which should actually satisfy the Americans. They want more. They want us to be bloodied in any kind of a conflict, and us to come, like the British wanted, that take the Indian soldiers and let them get killed in copious numbers so that they win the war. I'm sorry, I don't think any government in India can allow something like that to happen. So then the Western attitude is, if these guys are not willing to do all this, then let me just tighten the screws on them and tell them who's the boss. Now, whether that is a strategic reset which they think they're going to be going in for, and then what are the kind of options that leaves for us? How do we then propose to, traverse those waters?
I think that's a bang-on question. I was going to come to Ambassador Kumar, but General Hasnain has her hand up, so I'll go to you first, and then to Dr. Kumar.
Apologies to Ambassador Mohan. I'm just coming in for a few seconds. I entirely agree with what Sushant is saying. In fact, he's taken my argument well forward. What I'm trying to say is this aspect about reset, where they felt a little awkward about the speed at which India was developing its overall strategic confidence. This is one of the major reasons why I always ascribe that the Chinese came into Ladakh in 2020 also for this particular reason. And that the Americans somehow similarly agree with what the Chinese probably felt at that time and want to dent this strategic confidence, push us back a little bit and restore our relationship subsequently. That's the kind of thing which is happening at the moment.
Okay, I'll come back to you in more detail, but let's bring in Ambassador Mohan Kumar. And China is a whole separate conversation, and we'll address it separately. But I think Sushant asks a very important question, and General Hasnain partially agrees. Let's say for a moment this is about an attempt to reset. The feeling seems to be, let's bring these guys down a notch or two, 3 or 4 notches, and then reset. Let us recalibrate the power dynamic. And hence, there is the element of acknowledging Delhi's place with the envoy for South Asia being in Delhi. But, Holbrooke, if you remember how much India resisted the attempt by the Americans then to have any mention of India in Holbrooke's role. His role was confined to Afghanistan and Pakistan, or what the Americans call AFPAC, right? India would not have brooked, pun intended, Holbrooke being an envoy for India simultaneously. Why are we more comfortable with this idea of an envoy for South Asia?
What is a show with Barkha if all 3 panelists agree with each other?
Correct.
So let me take a different tack. I think it's an exaggerated notion of self-importance if you think others are trying to pull you down. You are a 4 trillion economy. They are dealing with economies which are 15 trillion and above. So don't even get me started. I'll tell you what the recalibration and the reset is, Barkha. In my view, the US has made up its mind, at least Trump has, that they will no longer look at India as necessarily, I'm choosing my words carefully, necessarily as a counterweight to China. And that is because they themselves are trying to do a grand bargain with China. If India stops thinking of itself as a counterweight to China, and if US is not going to use India as a counterweight, then we are looking at a reset in the relationship when India and the US will have a relationship strictly on its own merits. And I'm going to write about this, so I'm somewhat anticipating what I'm going to write. Frankly, we should stop expecting leverage as a country which will have a place as a counterweight to China. The US is itself going to do a grand bargain. That's my sense. And I think Trump will agree with the core interests of China. He will expect China to respect the red lines. One last point. I have been an ambassador for a long time. You will agree that some experience and some credit you should give me.
Always.
If you want an envoy to bring a wrecking ball, put influence on you, put unbearable pressure on the country, the last thing the president will do is to send him as an ambassador. The moment you send somebody as an ambassador, your brief is to improve relations, not to bring a wrecking ball. You do the wrecking ball from headquarters. You don't do it from Delhi. Trust me on this one. Robin Raphael is the model. You bring people from outside, you bring a wrecking ball, you put pressure. You don't send him as an envoy so he gets caught up in things like inaugurating an exhibition and going for somebody's, laying up.
Can I ask you something with absolute deference to your experience? I agree. An ambassador by definition is there to improve relations, not to be a wrecking ball. How do you anticipate the second part of his role to play out, the envoy for South Asia?
So the way I expect it to play out is I'm not ruling out what you guys are anticipating. Where I have a problem with what you are saying is you seem to think that is his unique responsibility. I see this as an opportunity. Call me a Micawber if you like. I see this as an opportunity to influence India's relationship with other South Asian neighbors. Forget Pakistan for a while. I think a lot of things can be done with Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Bhutan. A lot of things can be done. And I do not believe that America and India do not have common interests. So I genuinely think that he gives you an opportunity. Of course, there is a downside. Of course, I agree. This might be completely overruled and he might start, just going to Pakistan and coming back. I strongly doubt that somehow. I think he's essentially been given this brief because his assignment is a little bit more than just an Indian ambassador to Delhi who just wants to be bogged down by ceremonial roles. He is a trusted lieutenant of Trump. So my sense is you are invariably going to have an assistant secretary of state for South Asian and Central affairs, but instead of being in Washington, he's based in Delhi. I wouldn't overreact. But I would be vigilant, obviously. What you guys are saying is correct. We need to watch out. But to uniquely interpret his role as one of India, Pakistan is what I have a huge problem with, frankly.
I think that's a fair point. That South Asia is a lot more than Pakistan. And
not
therefore
we are Central Asia.
And therefore we ourselves should not hyphenate a relationship that we don't want hyphenated. And I totally take that point. General said, let's bring you in. Let us talk about this idea of India no longer being the countervailing force to China necessarily, where that leaves the Quad. Also, how much thought we think that Trump may have necessarily attached to this choice. For example, we have one of our regular viewers, Prasad, saying we all seem to be attaching too much of a well-thought, deep reason behind the choice of the ambassador. I think it was just another instinctive announcement. So, with Trump, you don't know. You don't know how he's thinking and who is thinking for him. In particular, when it comes to, let's say, India, did he make this choice? Did somebody whisper it in his ear? We have no idea. Do you understand? This idea that India is no longer the countervailing force to China and where that leaves the Quad. Is the Quad already dead in the water?
Barkha, I think we ourselves on this panel are doing a tremendous amount of thinking for Mr. Trump. Perhaps he has not done enough of it, and this video should reach him. Because on the first day of the appointment of the US ambassador, we are really going into raptures to understand this. No doubt it's a very good thing. But having said that, I am also observant about the fact that the US media, the US State Department, otherwise, or any other think tanks have not really commented very adversely on the last few weeks or maybe developments which have happened between India and China. If you see the visit of Mr. Wang to Delhi, the sense of improving relationship, Mr. Modi's impending visit coming up for the SCO summit, and things of that nature. By now, if this relationship was deteriorating very badly, you would have found a lot of negativities emerging at this time. That doesn't seem to be so. And I think everyone there in the deeper than deep state in the United States is observing this very carefully. And perhaps that is where the reassessment is going on. What is India's exact position as far as the United States is concerned? Is it only the geostrategic location that you are looking at? Or is it the geopolitical presence of India that they are looking at? I don't think the Trump administration is too clear in its mind at this moment, and there's a lot of thinking going on, a lot of analysis still going on. So, with Mr. Gor coming here at this particular time and not being a specialist on anything concerning South Asia, not being a specialist on anything concerning India, he's coming with an open mind. And I think that is one of the reasons why I say an onset, a reset of relations between India and the United States is on the cards almost immediately.
All right, let me get to last questions and my last comments. And my last comments have to be about China. Sushant, I want to start with you. You know, China's envoy to India says China stands fully with India when it comes to taking on bully Trump. But China, the same envoy, then also says that Pakistan is a victim of terrorism. Wang Yi is here. He meets with the Prime Minister, with the NSA, but then he goes to a trilateral of Pakistan, China, Afghanistan, and leads a strategic dialogue in Pakistan. China, above all, has just been an active participant in Operation Sindhu. You know, FM Jaishankar today said it was mistaken analysis to say that this cautious rapprochement with China was in a response to what's happening with America. But I think most people believe that that's exactly what's happening. The question is, are the Chinese really the better alternative strategically?
Not necessarily, not until you have serious problems with them. But I think what the External Affairs Minister said is a statement of fact. Whether people want to believe it or not, it's a statement of fact that you started, reaching out to the Chinese sometime last year. And, in a slow and steady manner, you've tried to bring the relationship back to some degree of normalcy. Nobody is saying that, everything is hunky-dory between India and China and we are now Hindi Chini bye-bye. Far from it. But I think we are taking certain steps, and perhaps both countries sense some kind of an opportunity with Trump running amok, some kind of an opportunity to try and get around some of the issues that have been bedeviling their relationship for many years now, in fact, for many decades. Now, whether I don't know whether something will reach to a point of conclusion. Very difficult to say, because some of these are sovereign disputes which are extremely difficult to tackle. But I think there is a sense that there is a kind of opportunity developing. Of course, the Chinese will try and exploit whatever distance has come between India and the United States. They'll of course want to put a wedge in it, just as we would in some of the other relationships where we have a problem. And then it's okay, par for the course. The Chinese have still not given up on Pakistan, so they will continue to deal with Pakistan and keep using the flowery language, which has very little meaning, because in economic terms, at least, there is no money that the Chinese are investing in Pakistan anymore. But again, the Chinese will also be signaling to Pakistan that if you are getting very close to the Americans, then we have the Indians. having said that, just one or two, Barkha, I'll just take a minute or two. Look, there is a reason why when I look at Americans wanting to reset relations with India, I look at the nature of the Trump administration, the transactionalism and the crass transactionalism which is on display. And not just with us, we were just simply partners, okay, with allies. Look at the way they've dealt with, not that I'm shedding any tears over Canada's predicament, but look at the way they've dealt with the Canadians or the Mexicans, or for that matter, the Europeans, right? What the Americans want is not alliances. They want what I think what the British had, a subsidiary alliance kind of a system, you know? That, yeah, you are my Mansabdar. When I want, you bring all your troops and you come to the aid of the emperor. Now, that is one thing. Maybe they're trying to push us into a similar kind of a relationship. Secondly, you know, you'll hear a lot of talk, at least among the MAGA crowd, that look, we've already made a mistake by making, you know, China what China is today. Why do we want to tempt fate with another India, especially an India, which even when it has, and I understand where Ambassador Kumar is coming from, the fourth largest economy in the world and all of that. But having said that, the guys who are just at $4 trillion, nowhere near, you know, the kind of global footprint that some of the other countries have. And yet these guys are showing us the eye. So what will happen if these guys become $12 trillion tomorrow, right? So this is the time to bring them under my influence, under my thumb, because otherwise ye to aaj nahi sunte to kal kaun sa sunenge meri baat, right? So I think that is also at play. And one final, maybe this is, I'm looking at it in a very, you know, it's a tantalizing possibility given this second appointment of this guy Gor as the you know, special envoy for South and Central Asia. Are the Americans looking at resetting the global chessboard in the South and Central Asian region with India as the pivot, instead of looking at only the Indo-Pacific now, looking at India as the pivot in the South and Central Asian region? I don't know. Maybe this is just one possibility which could be there. But we'll have to wait and see how that unfolds.
It is indeed a tantalizing question, Ambassador Kumar, because it opens up all sorts of thoughts. But I want you to build on your argument that India's relevance will no longer be vis-a-vis China necessarily, because Trump will try to do that grand bargain. I think India's outreach with China is in anticipation of perhaps that possibility, that realistic appraisal. That said, with all the problems we have with the Americans, right, they play out in full public gaze, as Jaishankar just mentioned. In China, one doesn't have the foggiest idea of actually what's going on. It's all remains speculative. There's deep opacity. There's deep sort of centralized control. I'm a little concerned about us sort of romancing the Chinese. I know no one's using that word but me. But suddenly there's all of this rah-rahness about the Chinese. We just saw what they did in Operation Sindoor.
So my view is that if you talk to the serious people in the government, I don't think anybody will go gaga over the relationship with China. There's a lot of reluctance about how far this nation should be taken. On the other hand, Barkha, I think there is tremendous appreciation of the dependence we have developed on China. Whether it is Chinese working for Foxconn, whether it is rare magnets and rare earths, whether it is active pharmaceutical ingredients, whether it is photovoltaic cells for your solar panels. So my sense is that if we accept that my proposition, and not everyone needs to accept it, but I would say that the US, at least under Trump, will not look at India as a counterweight to China, or at least not look at India solely as a counterweight to China. They will do a grand bargain with China. Trump will absolutely he believes in the great powers, which is Russia, China, US, and they will, I think, try to do a deal among themselves. And for the others, we will wait and see how things develop. That's my sense. If that understanding is correct, it actually frees India a little bit in its relationship with China. So that is, I think, what we are doing. But I don't think you can be romantic at all about the relationship with China. De-escalation has not happened. How can you be romantic and go rara when you have 50,000 soldiers on each side, eyeball to eyeball confrontation? So you would have to be extremely naive to kind of say that. And my problem is to really look at China because of the issues we are having with US. That kind of a zero-sum game will, I think, be terrible for Indian foreign policy. We have an opportunity to re-establish our relationship with the US. We have a chance of trying to re-establish our relationship with Russia, actually. And we have a chance of actually trying to see the limits of our relationship with China. My feeling is that is what we are doing. And Trump, unwittingly or wittingly, I think unwittingly, is helping us, because you can now have more room for maneuver, actually, vis-a-vis China and vis-a-vis Russia. That's my sense, frankly.
Yeah. So a lot of balls up in the air, General Hasnain. Let me give you the last word. You know, we had Admiral Shekhar Sinha on our program last evening, and he said, everybody goes on about this. First, it was 2-front war, then it was 3.5-front war. I think we have to prepare for a 1-front war, because at every border, you're effectively dealing with China. This is his argument. His argument is much further than our skepticism, our concerns, that he said that, you know, China is a master of this sort of double game, if you will. And, you know, it's Chinese whom we're taking on in Eastern Ladakh. It's the Chinese who you're effectively dealing with when you're dealing with Pakistan. That's his argument, right? It's the Chinese pumping in money into Nepal, into Sri Lanka. So we know this, Bhutan. I mean, we know this, right? So this China factor, I want you to end with where this all fits in with this new envoy being an envoy for South and Central Asia.
First of all, Barkha, I am one of those who firmly believe that China will not go to war with you. No, war fighting is not China's way of doing it. They will threaten you in every other way to make sure that you think you are at war, right? And a nation which thinks that war is virtually at war, because, you know, it is preparing itself all the time, doing all this. For the United States, there is nothing permanent in this policy which it seems to have adopted all of a sudden overnight in the last 3 or 4 months. This aspect of China not being that kind of a long-term major threat to it. I see this changing maybe in the next 6 months to a year itself. If the same reasons which you contribute to saying that China is not really a long-term adversary of the United States, they can work themselves the reversed way too.
That's true.
So I would strongly advocate that India's geostrategic and geopolitical importance, notwithstanding the fact that we are only at 4 trillion, sometimes it's good to say only 4 trillion, because otherwise, you know, you tend to overestimate yourself. The fact still remains that the Indian geostrategic location, the subcontinent's geostrategic location in the Indo-Pacific is still very much of great significance. Look at the sea lines of communication which goes through from here. Look at the trade line links which go through from here. I mean, the whole 80% of the world's trade travels through these routes out here. And India's importance, strategic importance, has to be understood from that angle too. Look at the huge mass of population we have. The next global cycle of terror is not very far away, I can tell you. With what is happening in Gaza, with what has happened in the Middle East overall, a next cycle will emerge in the near future sometime. Will this affect this part of the subcontinent? All this is going to create a huge turbulence for the United States. The United States post-Cold War policy has always been about stabilization internationally so that its economy itself can thrive, right? So I think we are in the vortex of a changing times at the moment. What has happened is Mr. Trump's time has just come, that there's a review of the United States priorities which is taking place, and therefore a reset is on the cards, and that's exactly what we argue out here in your show.
Well, I think that paints quite a scenario, especially when we think of the next global cycle of terror not being very far away. But as Foreign Minister Jay Shankar said today, the bottom line is we have some red lines. And I think the future, or the near-term future, is going to depend on how these red lines are negotiated, are defended, are protected, and how the Americans and indeed the Chinese or the Russians respond to those red lines. We leave it there. Thank you, Gen Ata Hasnain, Sushant Sareen, Ambassador Kumar. Always a pleasure. And to our audience, have a great weekend and see you soon.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.